Hello, everyone. It's Martha Novak. This is Real Talk with Martha Novak, and I'm glad to be with you this morning. We are talking about authenticity, and because it's such a broad subject, we are visiting a lot of different places. Last week, we visited attachment styles. We haven't finished that, so we are going to talk about that today. And how to turn yourself into a healthy attachment style. There is a fourth attachment style, you see. It's called the secure attachment style. There are three others that we've been talking about that are insecure. And the goal here is to take the insecure attachment styles and finally grow our emotional maturity and our spiritual consciousness and our emotional consciousness to the degree that we become secure. So we're talking about that today. Happy daylight savings time. I still got up really early, even though I can sleep late. Don't ask me why. Guys, let's do a prayer. Get ourselves all on the same page, and then we start. And good morning to you, Kat. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. Let's go forward together. All right, here we go. Dear God, who is all there is, you who are all we are and all everything is in the world, thank you very much for this marvelous day and these marvelous people who are listening and wanting to draw closer to the you that they are. We thank you so much for all of this marvelous opportunity to be together and to talk about things we might not ordinarily talk about in the world. We now ask that we see, hear, sense, and know what you would have us do. And we ask that we open to the truth that lies in your enlightenment in us, for this is our personal journey. We also ask that we give up knowing anything here, because really it's the you through us that knows it all. And if we will just listen to our highest self, there won't be any confusion, and we'll know what to do as a next step. So thank you, dear God, for all of this. We say this prayer in your name, in the name of the Ascended Masters and our love-centered guides and friends, and in the name of each and every person listening in. Thank you. And so it is. So guys, we continue our talk. I'm going to go back a little bit just to pick up those of you that are listening for the first time. I urge you to go back and listen to last week's show so you can understand all of it, because I'm just going to briefly touch on some of these attachment styles to catch up to the place where we left off last week. We are usually one of these with influences from the other two. So I want to put that on the table, that it is not good enough if you're going to really grow from this. It's not good enough to say, well, that's me, and ignore the other two, because you need to read the characteristics of those as well to see how you're put together. It's interesting because you just can't take authenticity as a subject without breaking down a lot of parts that make you inauthentic. You understand. And I think everybody would say they want to be authentic. That's their highest self speaking. But the fear-based ego child's mind tells us, ooh, that would not be good. People will reject us. Nobody will like the real me. The real me isn't competent. The real me isn't smart. The real me isn't good. God, put any adjective in you want. But is it true? Hello, Lisa. Good morning to you too, darling. What I was saying is, but is it true? A lot of these things, thank you, sweetheart. A lot of these things require you to be honest with yourself and to challenge the lies that you tell yourself. We learned those lies when we were in childhood. Sometimes those lies were the lies of our mothers and our fathers. Sometimes they're not ours at all. So it becomes really important for us to say the lie and bring it fully to consciousness. Ask yourself if it is a lie or a partial lie. Let's call it what it is. You know, there are all sorts of pretty words like mythologies for this. Let's not use the pretty words. If we want to get rid of it, let's just call it what it is. And then let's tell the truth. Now, the interesting thing about telling the truth to me is the truth isn't 180 degrees opposite the lie. It's its own thing. And you see, when we're telling lies to ourselves, when we are deceiving ourselves in some way, we're usually on an extreme. We're usually perfectly dreadful, or we're the, top of the mountain. Neither of those things are true, are they? We're just here on a journey. We're doing the best we can. We're works in progress. We're loving people, trying to be more loving. We have learned that love cannot be itself, so we have made it all sorts of different other emotions like fear and rage, and disgust and jealousy and a lot of other things. But now we're here to challenge ourselves to look at this and to turn everything back into love. This is why people become very loving that do this work. The question, will I have? And it's really interesting because I'll say, well, what is presence? And they'll say, well, I'll just look better, right? What presence really is being present, and being present with every single cell of your body as you do something. I hope that you all can tell that when I'm talking to you, all of me is talking to you. You can't see anything but the neck up, I guess, on your video. But every cell is engaged in our communication with each other. I was just seeing if we had any calls. When I said the word communication, I went, do I? By the way, I should tell you that we are live today. The guest call-in number is 347-850-1647. Keep in mind, that's the number that gets you on the air. So if you just want to listen, go to my website, Martha Novak, .com, and go onto radio shows, and there'll be a button for Blog Talk Radio, a button for Facebook Live. With them, you know, I'll go back and forth, or you can punch one or the other. And Lisa has just told me on Facebook Live that she's losing me, so we have speed up here. What I was saying is, on the website, you can go back. This is because, thank you, Lisa. Sometimes I think when we're about to lose each other, that will happen. I'll start getting really spotty. You keep in mind. Oh, okay, that's great. She says she's moving to Blog Talk Radio, so she gets the lesson. It, and sometimes we don't. Our technology, our speed is very slow. We've got the top speed that we can possibly have here, and it's still too slow to handle every platform consistently. So here we go. I'm going to go right into the lessons. So we learn four attachment styles. The attachment styles are your operating system to have relationships. Relationships with whom? Well, who is in your home, your mother, father, siblings, certainly, possibly even animals in your home, whether God was present, and who you are. Many people grow up without a sense of self. They have given it away to an anxious, preoccupied. That's an attachment style in a few minutes, and I'll tell you about a marvelous woman who is challenging that now. But when she her mother just usurped everything. There wasn't anything of the child left. They didn't want the child. They just wanted somebody to make the mother feel good, take care of the mother. The father didn't know what to do with the mother, so, he sacrificed the child. Just the way it is sometimes in our families. We've got to understand that there is no perfect family. All this kind of dynamic, whatever it is, goes on under the surface. And here's the good news. It's the way we go from the love-based self to the love-based self by challenging these things, by realizing we can do something else. So there is a secure attachment style. This means that when you grew up, and my real advanced class said to me when I first taught this, well, actually, when I first taught this, because I taught this years ago, but we come back around to it as we must do. Sometimes one just needs to hear the information, but one is not ready to do anything with the information, you see? And certainly they have reached a point where they're ready to do. So we had to double back to it. But they were very cute. They said, does anybody really have a secure attachment style? And some are more secure than others, but I think that, no, quite frankly, I'm not sure everybody has a secure attachment style. The reason is, where would the personal growth be in that? This is a very fundamental, even if you did have a good family, you ought to look at, because we are operating out of some degree of this. All right, so a secure attachment system means one big thing, and that is that you trust, you had caregivers that you trusted. Very few people did have caregivers that they could trust all the time. So here's really what it means to the person that works on themselves, that you start trusting people, that you start trusting the trustworthy people. Good heavens, we don't want you to go out and trust people that aren't trustworthy, but we should be able to trust be able to trust ourselves. For one reason or another, and we can talk about the backgrounds, did not have those people to lean on, and that becomes what we call the insecure attachment style. So the secure attachment style is having great relationships with people, being able to trust the trustworthy, spotting them, right? Being able to trust yourself in what it means, that you can function well. This is a wonderful basis for great leadership and much, much more. Happy life exists in the secure attachment style. Now, you'll hear me say a lot of times that how do you become authentic? Well, authenticity is a wonderful thing. It means the inside and the outside match. It means that your thoughts, feelings, behavior all match. It means that you aren't afraid to show who you are, right? On all those levels. And I think that this authenticity subject, one of the great approaches is to find out what is inside of us that isn't authentic at all. Where are we wearing masks? I think the attachment style, because it is so basic, things we take on as children, is a very, very good place to look, to learn, and to start our dropping the insecure styles and becoming more secure. All right, so with all that said, let's go into some review. I'm not going to do a lot of review, but here's some. There are 3 styles. One is called dismissive avoidant. The second is called fearful avoidant. It's also called anxious. third one is called anxious preoccupied. One of the things I want you to realize is all of these attachment styles are avoidant. Is an avoidant personality, and I hope that if you're working on that, you'll go right to look at these attachment styles, because this is pretty basic to the avoidant personality. Avoidant personality is somebody that just avoids things that they feel like that they will fail at. They just avoid taking risks. They avoid uncomfortable situations. Well, hello, Pat. Videos interruptus, Pat says this morning. My feed keeps freezing. Aside from that, you miss the tiara. I miss the tiara too. Pat's teasing me because I love to wear fancy headbands. It's my only thing when you have short hair that you can even get away with. And yes, I've seen too much Downton Abbey and too much Victoria and too much, things like that. Of course, those are my tiaras these days. Thank you, sweetie. I'm sorry that everything is freezing. It's a perfectly beautiful day. I always expect it when it's raining or doing bad things. Very placid day. We just don't have any video feed of speed of any sort. So, sorry. Please go and go back and forth between Blog Talk Radio and Facebook Live. So, the dismissive avoidant, let's talk about that. By the way, I'm taking, I like to find good sources to talk from. And there's a very good source. There's a man named Jeb, J-E-B, Kennison, K-I-N-N-I-S-O-N. Jeb Kennison has written some very nice articles on these different attachment styles. So if you miss anything that I'm saying, you can go back and listen to last week, and you can certainly get on his site. If you are going to get on his site, apparently it's rather extensive. So you need to type into the subject line the type that you're looking for: dismissive avoidant attachment style, or fearful avoidant, aka anxious avoidant, or anxious preoccupied. You need to give it that hint, and then it'll take you to the pages that I find valuable and would like to pass on to you. Okay. The dismissive avoidant. Dismissive avoidants have apparently high self-esteem, but low assessments of others in relationships. Unreliable caretakers in childhood have left them with a deep subconscious fear of intimacy, and close attachments are seen as unneeded. They tell themselves they'd like to have one. Not necessary. I'm very independent. The more a dismissive's partner asks for intimacy and attention, the more rejecting the dismissive becomes. Okay, they are people who are likely to end relationships, and they make poor relationship partners, and they find it difficult to maintain supportive relationships with children and close friends. Here's where I have to add my 2 cents. Except in fantasy. Except in fantasy. What do I mean by that? Well, I've got a very dear friend who is divorced, and she has loved her ex's sons, and has given them everything and tried to be a wonderful influence for them. The problem is she's not their mother, and it was all in fantasy, and they really have just taken everything that she offered, but they don't particularly care. They haven't matured at all to care and to be reciprocative. Why can't I say that word? Reciprocal in the relationship. All right, so that's the dismissive avoidant attachment style. Let's go on into, well, I'm going to say what to do about that if you find yourself that. Let's just look at all of them first, all right? So the second type I'll talk about is fearful avoidant, It's also called anxious avoidant. The fearful avoidant shares an underlying distrust of caregiving others, and they share it with the dismissive avoidant we just talked about, right? But they haven't developed, this fearful avoidant, haven't developed the armor of high self-esteem to allow them to do without attachment. They realize they need and want intimacy, but when they are in a relationship that starts to get close, they fear and mistrust, and all that surfaces, and they distance themselves. In psychology, this is called the approach avoidance conflict. Oh, yes, I want a partner. Don't get too close. Talk to the hand, right? At a distance, this person that is fearful avoidant really wants to get closer. But when that happens, the fear kicks in and they withdraw. This leads to a pattern, Jeb Kennison says, of circling and cycling, and the fearful avoidant can often be found in a series of short relationships ended by their finding fault with a partner or a potential partner who seems to be threatening the closer they get to understanding them. I have a dear friend that is this, and she is online dating, and one of the things that really does not work for her is that she is in fantasy a lot of times. Oh, this guy is just the one. He was just come in. He sounds so good on paper. Oh, this is marvelous. And she's starting to build a relationship, and she hasn't even met him. And I keep saying to her, do you realize this is a phone call? This is not a relationship, right? But because she is afraid of relationships, she fantasizes the relationship so she can have one. It's a relationship in fantasy. She goes then and has a cup of coffee with the guy. It's a relationship. And then he doesn't call on a regular basis. She's destroyed, right? That's not what her fantasy implied. You will always get hurt with fantasy. Fantasy is its own reward. We do that instead of being real, being authentic, and having real relationships with people. Don't you understand? And when reality, and reality is supposed to come smacking up against fantasy, it hurts. It hurts. People with these secure attachment would just say, well, I had a nice cup of coffee. I don't know where he went, but okay, next, right? That's not dismissive. This is somebody who would love to find the right one, but if it's not the right one, it's not the right one. There's just not a lot of energy in it. Oh, but this just really hurts the fearful avoidant because it's already a relationship. Don't do that, guys. A cup of coffee is a cup of coffee. A dinner is a dinner. A phone call is a phone call. Again, please listen to last week. I went into a lot more detail than I'm going into this week. The anxious preoccupied, I am going to hit a little harder this week because we stopped in the middle. We didn't even get to the middle, as a matter of fact, before we stopped. So I'm going to repeat a lot of the anxious preoccupied. And then we're going to go back and we're going to talk about how to fix these things. By the way, it's not an easy fix. You have to have courage. You have to challenge yourself. You have to see what you're doing and really decide you're not going to do it anymore. Because here's the problem. You keep doing things. All of us keep doing things when we get a reward. Now, You say, well, what in the hell is the reward for these people so far? And I'll say, well, for the fearful avoidant we've just talked about, the reward is the fantasy. And the reward is when it all goes south and the fantasy is destroyed, the fantasy is the soothing that she does to herself. She withdraws, she takes care of herself, she eats right, but she doesn't do that normally. She's too much in a hurry to make something happen and to have and to push a relationship through, you see? We're complicated little creatures, and it starts getting real complicated in these attachment styles. This is where, ladies and gentlemen, well, we can do it anywhere, but this is where I most see that you've made good things bad and bad things good. Perfect example I've just given you of the fearful avoidant. She has fantasy is good, and soothing when it all goes south is good. Instead of realizing that whole system, that whole structure based on fearful avoidant has got to go. And a healthy, wonderful, conscious relationship needs to take its place. And that to go. Instead, because she gets her crumbs out of it that make her feel good, she continues it. Everybody continues what they're doing because they get something out of it. And again, oftentimes they've made things that are momentary good and things that are long-term bad. Isn't that interesting? We were talking yesterday in my advanced classes that anything generated from the egoic child's mind and the attachment styles are, except for the secure attachment style, these insecure attachment styles are generated, the structure exists in the egoic child's mind. What you get there will always be temporary and unsatisfying to your life as a whole. I want you all to realize that, because it's extremely important for you all to wake up to the fact that you're reaching for, I've always used this image, it's like you have the little crumbs that you like in your hand, you're just clutching them real hard in your fist, but you're standing in a bakery that you own. For God's sake, let's challenge and put down the crumbs so you can have more. Like a great relationship and a great life and a great relationship with yourself. That's where it starts, and with everything else, you see? Instead, we settle for crumbs. Those crumbs are what we get egoically from doing our structure. But you can just have so much more. All right, so let's go into the anxious preoccupied now. Again, I urge you to listen to last week's show. You'll have a lot of information, and you can get on Jeb Kennison's site to read more. And by the way, there are lots of theories out there about all this. I'm giving you what I believe to be true, but of course there are a lot of people out there that are talking about this. And I think one of the things that makes this rather hard is that each methodology that people have sometimes change the names of these. So it's kind of hard for you to go, wait a minute, man, what are they talking about? Which one are they talking about if I'm going to relate it to what I already know, right? But I think we've got a good system. I think Jeb Kennison spells it out very clearly, and I think we're trying to do the rest. All right, people with anxious preoccupied, often called just preoccupied, are the second largest attachment type group. There's about 20% of the population. You know, in my opinion, I think the numbers are much higher. I mean, I just think everybody needs to look at your attachment style. I don't care how great you think your home was. I just think there's something to learn here. Because preoccupied's early attachment needs were unsatisfying and inconsistently satisfied, they crave intimacy but tend to feel doubtful about their own worth, making it harder for them to trust that they are loved and cared for. At the extremes, and with a more secure or dismissive partner, they are viewed as needy or clingy and can drive others away by their demands for attention. Many have never been able to come to terms with their memories of parental failures, Jeb Kennison says. Now, he goes into, I would imagine the man is a psychologist. I really don't know Jeb Kennison. I just like the way he's written these styles. And I'm quoting directly from all of them for you. He goes into talking about a clinical, somebody named Karen, who is seeing clients and has described certain clients this way. So I think this is very valuable. I'll go into it again. Often they spoke as if the feelings of hurt and anger they had as children were as alive in them today as they were 20 or 30 years before. The childhoods they described were often characterized by intense efforts to please the parents, considerable anger and disappointment, and by role reversals in which the child had to parent the adult. This is just textbook for somebody I know that has this. She was designated the parent for the mother who just couldn't even get out of bed and who had lots of mental issues. But when the preoccupied talks about this, the memories are rambling. They're expressed in a confused and sometimes incoherent manner, as if they've never been able to get a grip on what happened to them and integrate it into a comprehensible picture. You keep in mind that in this particular thing, and this dear friend that I'm talking about that has this, her mother was mentally ill, seriously mentally ill. She was hospitalized several times. She was given shock treatments. She was sent off throughout her life. But this child, who is now the adult, is still trying to make sense out of all of this. And it's an incomprehensible situation. You don't make sense of someone who's mentally ill. You do not do that. You can't do that. And yet here we are as children trying to do that, and we carry it into adulthood. It makes us quite conflicted, you see? Instead of our realizing finally, wait a minute, this is nothing I can understand. I just have to get myself well here. Okay. This is still Karen speaking, they seemed still so enmeshed with their parents that infantile feelings flooded and bewildered them as they recall the past. Now keep in mind, infantile feelings flood and bewilder them as adults. Okay? So this is and by the way, I very much need to put on the table, this is not gender related at all. Women don't have this more than men. Men can have this just as much as women. All of these styles, there is no correlated gender specific information here. This is all people, okay? Put it on the table, because I may give you an example here and it may be a woman just because a woman has come into me with this. That's all. It has nothing to do with anything else. I've known men that have this. I just have stories about this woman. He goes on to say, now we're out of Karen, the therapist, the insecurity is often the result of an insecure parental figure who is herself too needy to allow the child independence with assurance. And that's certainly true. A mother, now we're back to Karen, okay? A mother who has never worked through her own ambivalent, now this is so interesting. Oh, I think this is marvelous. A mother who has never worked through her own ambivalent attachment has probably been struggling all her life to find stable love. When she was a child, she may have been pained by the competent, steady caring that she saw her friends' parents give. And my client has said she had a little friend named Jessica, and Jessica had the best parents in the world. She just loved Jessica, and she loved being over at Jessica's because she saw what real parenting was like. As an adult, she may be prone, we're talking about the preoccupied, to a nagging, uncontrollable jealousy in any close relationships where she feels cause for doubt. She may want to love deeply and steadily, but it is hard for her because she's never been filled up enough with patient, reliable love to be in any kind of position to give it. Some preoccupied mothers frequently intrude when the baby is happily exploring on his own and push for interaction even when the child resists it and doesn't want it. For if a mother unconsciously wishes to keep a baby addicted to her, there's no better strategy than being inconsistently available, right? Nothing makes a laboratory rat push a pedal more furiously than an inconsistent reward. This dear client of mine would tell me stories about if she didn't do exactly what her mother wanted her to do. Exactly. If she didn't say exactly what her mother wanted her to say. If she didn't take care of all her needs. The mother cut her off. She wasn't there for her. She just wasn't. Well, first of all, she wasn't there at all for her. But she didn't give her any affection. She didn't give her any love. But when she did it, that's when she got it. When she's abandoned herself. You understand that? That's when she got rewarded. As preoccupied children grow up, others notice they are too self-centered to quietly listen to any kind of emotional messages sent by other people. And they're likely to be unreliable partners in games or work. And fellow students, this was a class that I think Karen taught. Karen, the therapist, said, the fellow students assessed the preoccupied students as embroiled, angry, incoherent when speaking about their parents, and they were seen by their peers as more anxious, introspective, and ruminative. Ruminative being someone who ruminates, right, and has things going over in their head that they never share with you. Since they require constant messages of reassurance, the preoccupieds find it hard to venture away from their partners or loved ones to accomplish anything, to accomplish goals, like getting a job, by the way, and will undermine their partners if necessary to keep their attention for themselves. There is another person I'm going to talk about who comes in, whose husband's doing really well in work. And she comes in and that's great that he's doing so well. That's wonderful. And it's all about her. It's all about her emotional state. Oh my God, drama city. She takes it right away from him, what he's doing. Quite interesting. The classic clingy child or parent or partner is acting out of their anxiety about what I said earlier, abandonment. Now, we go back into Karen. Here we go. The preoccupieds are hypervigilant about separations, likely to become anxious or even panicky when left. and to be overcome by feelings of clinginess and impotent rage. They do not readily venture forth or take chances, for they do not believe their attachment needs will ever be met. They cling tenaciously to what they have, often using guilt and blame to keep their attachment figures on a short leash. And this is true. You know, one of these people that I'm talking about has attracted a man who had a very blaming household. So she blames him. She says, I'm not blaming him, and she certainly is, in tone, in every other way. But she's very tricky because she's learned to say all the right words. So she can say, I'm not blaming him. And then after a day or two of this big blow up, and when I challenge her, she goes, oh, yeah, there was blame there. Yeah, always is. Always is. You are getting back what you are doing. And we need to start listening to that, right? Okay. Anxious, preoccupied children learn to manipulate to get their needs met. And invariably, their manipulations get carried over to adulthood. The child may become seductive or cute, act fretful, or make others feel guilty about not giving them the attention he or she wants, all depending on what strategic styles are successful in their family of origin, right? Okay. Keep in mind, as we talk about these attachment styles, that there are things that all these styles have in common. Number one, it is a way to avoid who you really are. Use these insecure attachment styles, and you are avoiding who you really are. Second of all, they are dangerous to you because you think this is who you are. You've crossed that line from I have one of these styles into I am one of these styles. And that's not true. There's an authentic being that's deeper in your psyche. You're just afraid to take a chance on that person being loved and cared for. Okay? You're afraid to take a chance on what you might really genuinely know as a person with a sense of self there. You see? And the other thing, I think that all of these styles have in common, whether the word is in them or not, because avoidant isn't in the name of all these styles, and neither is this word I'm about to use, and that's anxiety. Anxiety is present always when you are not being authentic. Guys, I used to be an actor. I had an acting school. I still coach actors from time to time. And when an actor is nervous, they're thinking about nothing but themselves, and they're anxious because they're not being real. They're not being authentic. They're not bringing that character in a true, authentic way up to use. Therefore, they're anxious. Anxiety is your body telling you that something needs to be adjusted. But what we do with it is often throw our hands up like Camille and say, oh my God, I'm anxious. Get me out of my anxiety, when you're supposed to look at what you did. It's just a signpost saying you're anxious because something else is going on. Look and see what it is. Hello, Yassine. I'm so glad that you're with us today. What a lovely name. We're supposed to use anxiety as a signpost. It tells us that something's wrong, you see. And then if we do some work on ourselves, we can see what it is. Now, guys, this isn't something, and I'm going to go back to anxious, preoccupied in just a minute. This isn't something, these attachment styles, that I think you can get by yourself. I really don't. I think you can receive the information, and I think you can realize what you're doing mentally. I think you're somewhat effective in changing this when you know what they are. But you keep in mind your ego child's mind wants you to continue. Well, hello, Peter. Oh, I'm so glad that you're with us today. It's always good to hear from you. uh, we want to, our ego child's mind wants us to disguise ourselves. It doesn't want you to be authentic. Don't you understand? The ego child's mind has learned, it's come along at 18 months old in your development, around that time. Before that time, all time was now. And no matter how great your parenting was, things happened that the child did not understand, and told itself that this is a scary world. I mean, it could be something as little as it not being fed on time because the parent's father died. But to the child, that when all time is now, that goes, oh my God, I'll never be fed again. Oh, this is terrifying. And it really always has that inside them, that this is a frightening world for whatever reason. Well, that's really interesting. When your ego starts developing at 18 months old in the ego child's mind, it develops because enough bad things have happened before that time, when all time was now, that you need a system. All time isn't now, and you develop the ego in the ego child's mind to scan the future for like things that happened in the past that hurt you, so you can avoid them. You know, it's a perfect system for a child. It was designed to keep you alive. That's wonderful. But you are alive. And when we're adults, with the adult brain that forms in our 20s, it's time to understand this more on a philosophical, energetic, and many more levels, spiritual level, where we say, you know what? I don't have to do it the same way again. And you go on a search for self. And that's the sense of self that is found and strengthened. Thank you, Peter. And it's a wonderful thing. Instead, so many people hide from this kind of information. Do you understand? Why? Just because it's new, just because you have to have some courage to face what you've been doing so you can change into something better and get more happiness, more joy, more gratitude, a better income, and so much more that comes out of these blessings. You see? We are sometimes our own worst enemies, and that's a bloomin' shame, because we just don't have to be. Now, with that said, let's go back to the part of preoccupied, the anxious preoccupied, that you haven't heard, okay? I'm still talking from Jeb Kennison's article. There was a study that was by Doctors Hazen and Shavers that said preoccupied adults in a work setting tended, this is their quote, tended to procrastinate, had difficulty concentrating, and were most distracted by interpersonal concerns. Yep. Just can't work this day. I don't feel like it. Okay. I just couldn't do it. You know, I need to stay home and take care of myself. Well, that's a fantasy. Now you need to get up and, you know, live in the world. That's what we're learning. Don't think for a moment that any of this is criticizing anybody, but you have to challenge this. I do want you to challenge these things in you and see them in you if they exist. But this is no criticism. This is just to say, come on, guys. If you're working from one of these insecure attachments, and gosh, who isn't? Because we can get through this, let's do it. Okay, so they had difficulty concentrating, were most distracted by interpersonal concerns. It won't be a surprise that they had the lowest average income. of these three groups, or four groups if you include the secure attachment. This inability to concentrate on anything but relationship handicaps. It handicaps the preoccupied tremendously and makes them undesirable, really, for teams in business, where they will put their need for reassurance ahead of the task at hand. As a team member, the preoccupied individuals require more management time and attention, and, by the way, produce less work. Interesting. Okay. Now we go back to Karen. I just think Karen's wonderful. So here we go. I don't think this is Karen. No, this is still Jeb. He's wonderful too. Okay. In dating, the preoccupied put their best foot forward and try too hard, sometimes missing the subtle cues that would allow them to listen better to understand their partner's feelings. They feel they must always prove themselves and act to keep your interest. They want constant interaction, constant touch and reassurance. By the way, other types can find this absolutely maddening. As long as they are getting the attention they want, they will let their partner get away with being difficult in other ways. Even negative attention is keeping the touch game going. It's interesting. I've noticed for years, people that do not have normal, loving relationships, often, and I'm stepping away from this, but it certainly bears saying here, often use other emotions as a way to keep in touch. In other words, thank you. In other words, for example, they may despise their family. They may have a real toxic family. They decide they're going to be enraged by them. And they say, I don't have anything to do with those people. Rage is the relationship. I'm sorry, they do. They absolutely do. Those things need to be worked through. Why? Because that's taken a lot of energy when you need your energy to build a wonderful life you want and bring the things in that you are absolutely wanting to have in a secure relationship and a wonderful life. We keep going with Jeb. If their relationships last, it is often because they found a partner whose insecurities dovetail with their own, who will participate in a dysfunctional game similar to what they were raised with. One of my clients has found an adorable husband. They're both such nice people. I'm crazy about them. But she is the anxious preoccupied, and he's the dismissive avoidant, we think. I don't know whether he is or not. He thinks he is. And it is really interesting because she says, I need to be fixed. And what he did when he was coming along, he had a mother that was always needing to be fixed, and he fixed her, right? This gets everybody in trouble. This muddles things. You're just supposed to be equal partners. That's the dance. That's the game that Jeb Kennison is talking about here. While the preoccupieds have strong feelings and can discuss them when calm, let's talk about calm for a minute. Do you know what manic energy is? Now, I'm not talking about bipolar mania. I'm not talking about mental illness here. I'm talking about when people even have an insecure attachment style, they can go into a heightened energy. It's mania. They can add fantasy to it, at which time, by God, you're not going to talk reason with these people. Bad decisions come from these things, and they don't want to hear that it's a bad decision for you. I have the hiccups. comparison. You're just not going to get through to anybody when they're in a manic state. Some people have never learned to have a discussion where people disagree. If they didn't learn how to handle that well, there are people that just go into mania automatically and try to talk you down and shout you down and tell you you're wrong so that they can keep their platform and they don't feel threatened. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of ways, and there are a lot of people that go into mania for a lot of those different kinds of experiences. It's very important for you to recognize when someone's in mania, and it's very important for you to recognize that you're going into mania. Now, how do you fix that? You fix that on the front end, because once you are in that, there's nothing you can do about it until it dissipates on the other end. Sometimes it dissipates over a period of months. Sometimes it dissipates over a period of days. Sometimes it dissipates over a few hours. Sometimes it dissipates in a few minutes. I hope for you that it's short. But regardless, you have to catch it on the front end. It's very important for you to feel, I'm feeling myself going into this kind of manic state, and I'm not going to do it. I'm going to pull my energy down. And it's always good, if you don't know how to handle a situation, for you to go to a coach and let us coach you on what to say, what to do, how to stay present in that, right? How to stay present and have a conversation that might be threatening. Guys, nobody likes conflict, but we must know how to deal with it. And we must know how to deal with it like a responsible adult, an emotionally mature adult, which is to have a conversation. We must unearth whatever the agenda is underneath that makes us manic, trying to gain control, right? And we've got to say, wait a minute, I don't need that. I need to stay here, and we need to converse and come up with a solution that we can both agree on. That's the way to handle it, guys. So watch the mania. You know, there's something called a threshold that you cross to go into that energy. And I say that it's like a child that goes into it, and there's no way once they're in it to get them to see reason, and they've got to pretty much cry themselves out and have their little fit, and then on the back end when they're exhausted, that's the only way you can really get to them, right? You notice it in dog training as well, by the way, not that I am casting any aspersions of any kind here, but you know, you learn when you have a puppy that you must break their barking cycle. You don't let them go into their mania. You distract them, okay? If another dog is coming down the street, you turn the other way, or you give them a dog biscuit. My dog doesn't particularly care about dog biscuits, so we just simply have to move, right? The point is, you don't let them go into that to begin with. Because once they go into that, and once they have a pattern of being in that, and this is the same is true for you, you have an entrenchment and you go there every time until you say, wait a minute, there's an entrenchment here. This is where I go every time. I'm not going to do it anymore. So you want to catch that on the front end. Okay. So that was when the preoccupied has strong feelings and can discuss them when calm. Oh, that was about being calm. Their feelings are centered around their needs for attention and the failure of others to provide it on demand. They commonly blame others for not understanding their feelings and needs, while not feeling safe enough in the relationship to describe them openly. And what's really interesting here is they're blaming you for not understanding when they're continuing to do this. So who's the one that's not understanding here? Them. You see? They're not understanding what they're doing and what they're motivated by. Keep in mind, again, I launch off, don't I? There are two things, and only two things in the world human beings argue about. Two things. You don't care about me, okay? Comes directly out of an attachment style, an insecure attachment style. You don't care about me, and I'll never get what I want. Both of those chronic and what I want to say worldwide beliefs about ourselves come directly from attachment styles. So you bet I think people ought to look at this, okay? Anything that you really argue about that is about how you're raising your child or this or that always will fit under one or two of those things, of those subjects that I just named, or both of them. If the argument is hot enough, both of them are in play, you see? You don't care about me, and I'll never get what I want. But is that really true? No, it's not. They're just spitting out from the ego child's mind from our childhood selves. Okay, moving along and back to Jeb. Preoccupieds want to merge with their partner, so this type is prone to codependence, a dysfunctional mutual dependence where neither partner matures further. Now, keep in mind, consciousness fixes this because you will mature further if you confront these things, you see? But you have to be willing to, because if you're still getting something out of it, you can say, I'm getting something out of it, but I do this over and over and over again. There's got to be more, and here we are at more. So put on your courage boots and let's do the work. They are profoundly disturbed by and resist even short separations. The single preoccupied badly wants a partner and spends a lot of time feeling lonely. Jep goes on to say, the key to happier relationships for the anxious preoccupied is working toward an inner feeling of security and independence. This is easy when a secure partner is present. The reliability of the partner's signaling and response reassures, letting inner security grow. Now, I take exception to that. I really do. Because I see over and over again in clients that if they have a secure partner, this marriage probably isn't going to work. Because what they do is rely on this person way too much. And if a secure person, here's something interesting. You can start out with a secure attachment, rare, I know, but you can, having done work on yourself. And you can live with somebody like this, and after 20 years, you've got an insecure attachment. Isn't that interesting? You have to be mighty aware to know where your limit is. So I don't agree with that statement. I agree with most things he's saying, but I don't agree with that. Okay. Preoccupieds can take a clue from their type label. They are preoccupied with the idea of a relationship. Getting involved with absorbing activities and friendships with others can take their mind off their problem of partner relationships. And self-coaching can help, replacing inner dialogue about failings and worries, about what others think about you. Those things can all be replaced with self-talk that can prevent overly clingy and paranoid behavior that drives away significant others. Do you think I don't have an opinion about that one too? Because I do. All right. Guys, affirmations are great, but most of the time you're arguing with yourself when you say them. And I just like the truth, rather than you're saying, no, I am independent. And do you realize when you say something like that and you're not in agreement with it deep down inside, your subconscious mind hears, oh, no, you're not. And you get the opposite from what you want. So let me say this again. You go to what is true. You recognize a lie, or you recognize what you're doing. I am dependent. I'm codependent with my partner. I don't know what I do if they left. They don't know what I do, what they do if I left. I couldn't do this that they do. I couldn't hire anybody to do it. I wouldn't know where to begin. All right. You've got to go to the truth. So what's the truth compared to that? I need this person for all sorts of things. The truth is you don't want to go to the extreme. I don't need anybody. That just makes you a dismissive avoidant, right? No. You go to the truth. I'm dependent. I'm more dependent than I want. I'm dependent for these things that I'm listing right now. So what I'll do is I'll learn how to do some of these things for myself, and I'll try to be less dependent on my partner because I am growing and changing, and this is one of the things that I've got to accomplish. Now that's the truth, that you're a work in progress, that you need to learn certain things and get to it. The truth, the real truth, is what will heal you. It'll set you free, as they say, right? Now, here's what's interesting. About a year ago, I challenged my advanced class to challenge their lies and to tell themselves the truth. These people have been with me for quite a long time. Well, hello, Mark. That is just fine. You go do that. I think that's wonderful. I'm so glad that you're here. He says he's walking into Sunday school. Yeah, well, here we are. Darlings, here's what I'm saying to you. In my advanced class, they couldn't find their truths. They had lied to themselves so much. So I try to give you examples of this as we're talking here. And this is sometimes what you need a coach for, because if you don't have one that says, well, how about this truth? How about entertaining this? You'll just keep lying to yourself. Or you'll do the opposite, which is lying to yourself. You see? Sometimes we need another brain on board with us that will help us get to things that our ego child's mind simply doesn't want us to see. All right, moving ahead. Build confidence in yourself and your value by accomplishing real tasks, and try harder to see things from others' points of view before acting on fears and anger about how they treat you. Soothe your own worries before they trouble others, and have more faith in their goodwill before you assume the worst. Okay, all good. I'll have some more tips for you in a short while. One of the topics that he brought up with this style is hypervigilance. The anxious, preoccupied are intensely focused on keeping track of the emotional states of their partners. Which I think is very interesting. But hair-trigger misjudgments and mistakes are more likely with this group and can get them into trouble. Because when thinking of the one of the people I've just given you examples of, she'll often blame her partner for feeling this way, and she doesn't know how a partner feels. She only knows how she feels and how the partner is making her feel. So she's making these grand assumptions. He's very offended by that. He feels very blamed by that. She hadn't listened to him. She hasn't listened to him to see what's really going on and why he acted the way he did. She's self-involved, you see. Okay. And it just goes south from there. The anxious preoccupieds should work toward taking time to consider all the evidence before reacting negatively, so that their fine sensitivity to others' emotional states will serve them better. The anxious preoccupied, Jeb goes on to say, will sometimes explain that they feel very strongly, and so they can't help themselves when overreacting to perceived threats in their relationships. The real explanation for their paranoia is not so much the intensity of their feeling. It is their insecurity and lack of understanding and trust in others' good intentions. That's quite brilliant. Yes, I agree with that. Because they're so wrapped up in their fear of losing attention and affection, they don't take the time to see matters from anybody's point of view other than their own, certainly not their significant others. And so they blunder into misunderstandings and attempts to control the partner through protest behavior, like being passive aggressive, anything. Just an example, one of those couples that I know feel very different about politics, and they argue, and they don't just discuss the issues. I'm all for a good discussion of issues. They argue out of this, trying to control the other. This is particularly coming from the preoccupied part of the equation. I don't see why you would ruin a relationship over something like that when it's going to change in 4 to 8 years. And that doesn't mean I don't want you to have your opinions. I certainly do. But letting a relationship go south for it? Come on. Love is much more important. Making everybody feel safe in their own home is much more important. And that's a real strong basis for love. Okay. So, once activated, they're often consumed with thoughts that have one single purpose, and that is to reestablish closeness with their partner. These thoughts are called activating strategies. Activating strategies are thoughts or feelings that compel you to get close, physically or emotionally, to your partner. Once he or she responds to you in a way that reestablishes security, you can revert back to your calm, normal self. There's a no normal self here. You have given up yourself to do this. I'm going to put that on the table right now. Why in the world would you do that? This isn't you. This is what you're doing. Two different things. Now, here's some activating strategies that I think are important to probably mention. Thinking about your mate, having a difficult time concentrating on other things. Remembering only their good qualities. Putting them on a pedestal, underestimating your talents and abilities and overestimating theirs. And by the way, we're talking about fantasy when you're putting them on a pedestal. Fantasy can last for years, but let me tell you, it's a pretty grim awakening when you go, wait a minute, here's reality here. The whole point here is face reality as soon as possible, because years later you're going to have lots of anger and disappointment and mistrust built up because this person did not meet the fantasy, and there's going to be more to get through. We just need to be real here. You've got to recognize that you're a fantasist and do something about it, right? Okay, some more of these are that an anxious feeling only goes away when you're in contact with them. Believing this is your only chance for love, as in, and this is a quote, "I'm only compatible with very few people. What are the chances I'll ever find another person like him or her? It takes years to meet somebody new. I'll end up alone." And that's very scary for the preoccupied, of course. And believing that even though you're unhappy, you'd better not let go, as in, quote, "If she leaves me, she'll turn into a great partner for someone else," or "he can change," or all couples have problems. We're not special in this regard." And you sit on the troubles instead of working through them, right? Protest behavior is a term originally coined to describe children's screams and cries when separated from their caregiver, now applied by analogy to adult attempts to display unhappiness with a lack of attention and unresponsiveness from partners. Some protest behaviors is part of every relationship. We say, "Hey, you said you'd text me when you got home. You didn't do that," right? But the clingy, insecure, anxious, preoccupied protest so frequently that they run the risk of turning off and driving away their partners. When someone is said to be high maintenance, that means they're excessively needy and need more comfort and more communication, more reassurance than is reasonable. Protest behaviors are intended to force a reassuring response from the partner, and resorting to them frequently is bad for any relationship at all. So here are a list of protest behaviors. Calling, texting, or emailing many times, waiting for a phone call, loitering by your partner's workplace in hopes of running into him or her, saying, "Oh, it's an accident," right? Not at all. I have a friend who, she's not a client, but she trained her husband. I remember quite early on, they didn't get along well because he still had a very strong sense of self. And he objected to this because she wanted him to call her 12 times a day. That was love to her. And he wouldn't do it. That was 30 or 40 years ago. He does it now. Okay. Withdrawing, sitting silently engrossed in the paper, literally turning your back on your partner, not speaking, talking with other people on the phone and ignoring the partner. Keeping score, paying attention to how long it took them to return your phone call and waiting just as long to return theirs, waiting for them to make the first make-up move and acting distant until such a time. You know, guys, I can't tell you how many people through the years have said to me, "I hate games that people play in relationships." And I'll say, "Great. What are the games you hate?" Not one person in my entire career has ever been able to tell me that. Well, I say, listen to these two shows, last week and this week, and you'll have a good position to talk from when somebody asks you that question. Because these are the games, right? Another one, acting hostile, rolling your eyes when they speak, looking away, getting up and leaving the room while they're talking. Acting hostile, by the way, can escalate to out-and-out violence sometimes. Another one, threatening to leave, making threats. We're not getting along, but I don't think I can do this anymore. I knew you weren't right for each other. I'm better off without you. If you keep going like this, we're going to get divorced. All while hoping the partner will stop you from leaving and be the way you want them to be. It's a control mechanism. Manipulations, acting busy or unapproachable, ignoring phone calls, saying you have plans when you don't. Making him or her feel jealous, making plans to get together with an ex for lunch, going out with friends to a singles bar, telling your partner that someone has hit on you today. So I'll say in passive aggression is a common one too, right? Let's talk about, before we end, we have 8 more minutes. Let's go on and talk about ways to not do this anymore. Let's start back with the dismissive avoidant, where we started this talk today. I think that it's very important to learn to be present. A lot of dismissive avoidants that I know just go somewhere else in their minds. They don't listen to you. They're not there with you in this present moment. Now, they've learned that the present moment is uncomfortable. So the dismissive avoidant really does need to learn how to work through problems. That's something that, there's another something that all 3 of these insecure styles have in common. They've never learned to work through a conflict. They've never learned to work through a problem. Their way of working through it is to disappear in their heads or physically, to be avoidant. But you can't do that anymore. You're going to have to learn to stay there, be present, not be threatened, keep calm, and have a dialogue that results in a solution for everybody. Okay? This dismissive avoidant also needs to be realistic about themselves, because they built an armor that I'm the smartest. And here's the interesting thing about this, and I think this is very, very important for you to realize, that you can play it out overtly, I'm the smartest, you're the stupid one, or they can be doing that on the inside and you never see it. They can go very non-emotive, and it becomes quite the judgment of you. Interesting, huh? You don't have to see it at all for them to be doing this. All right? So it's very important for the dismissive avoidant to realize that everybody has some contribution and to not judge that contribution. Now, often dismissive avoidants are judging their own contribution very harshly indeed. And that's why they work so hard at being perfect, right? You go back and listen to the show that ran 3 weeks ago on the imposter syndrome, because perfectionism is one of those things. And you simply must get this all balanced. Now, you're not better than anybody else. As a matter of fact, in God, everything is the same. Isn't that interesting? In terms of value, the smallest pebble or grain of sand in your walkway is doing its job, and it's as valuable as anything else. Isn't that interesting? Flies in the face of our narcissism, ladies and gentlemen. And by the way, if you're going to be dismissive avoidant, the extreme of that, guess what it is? You're right, narcissism. That's it. So we've got to see you and see everybody else in balance. And you can't hide this, because it's going to come out in this style. Your behaviors will give you away. You can't have control like this. One of my friends who's dismissive avoidant has created businesses so she doesn't have to look at this, right? She's never happy in them. Another friend cleans everything in sight, even things she's not responsible for, because she's learned all these people are reaching for control when they feel they don't have any. Stop. realizing that help is all around, realizing that you can only do what you can do, everybody else has value too, creating a balanced response to things, extremely important. Confronting the feelings of being out of control by seeing what you can do in other ways. You have a bad neighbor. You feel out of control. You're having all these undesirable thoughts about that. There's a way to work through that so that that becomes a non-issue. But you don't know what they are if you're dismissive avoidant. You see? Okay. It's very important that the dismissive avoidant, and I say this about all these styles, does not go into fantasy or into mania. Because when you cross that threshold and you go into that, you are just going to have to play it out until it's over. Now, those are some light ways to do this. You keep in mind, I think everybody needs to confront these things with a therapist. Really, I do. With somebody who's an energy worker. That's what we do here. And I think you do, because your ego child's mind doesn't want you to stop this. It says you're safe. You'd rather be safe than take chances on a life that may or may not be there for you. What? Okay. Let's talk about how to overcome the fearful avoidant. Now, these are right off the top of my head. Again, this is the anxious avoidant, is another name for it. I think it's real important that you challenge lies. This particularly becomes important with this style. You have got to challenge your lies. And that's very hard to do because there is a kind of confusion that you put on yourself as a fearful avoidant. You can't see what the truths are and what the lies are. I'm going to say one of the things that I think really helps all three of these things is to know when you're in the ego child's mind and when you're in the highest self. This confuses people terribly. They don't know that. Here's a way for you to know it. The ego child's mind, well, let's start with the highest self and contrast it. The highest self mind is creating a win-win situation. It is me and you creating an agreement by which we can agree or disagree. A lot of words in that. But it's an agreement to agree or disagree. Nobody gets hot about it. Everybody has respect for everybody else, including yourself, by the way. You are in this mix where nobody is higher or lower than anybody else. And you're trying to find a workable solution that you can both agree with. Good. Let's go to the ego child's mind.
90 seconds.
Am I out of time? Oh my God, we're going to have to do this next week. The ego child's mind, it's all about me. Me, at the expense of you. Or you, at the expense of me, which still makes it all about me, because I'm become the victim. And if I'm become the victim, that's where my focus is. And I'm going to blame you for everything. All right? Guys, I'm going to stop there. We'll talk about how to fix these next week, and we'll go on probably with another subject as well. But we will continue this next week. I want to thank you very much for listening to this show. Please tell your friends about the show and post it on social media so that we may get the word out that we're here and doing this. And we do this to try to reach people, and you're a big part of that. You know the people that might be interested and that need this. So there we are. Guys, thank you so much. I'm going to pray for you when we get off the air, all of you that are listening, whether you have identified yourself or not. And I say thank you so much for being so gracious and being here with me. It means a lot, okay? And I hope you have a wonderful week. You remember, God loves you.
Seconds.
God loves you through you. Let's honor that this week, okay? Take care now.